Shalom, this is TV7's Israel at War update, and as we mark today, day 508 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched the atrocities committed on October 7th of 2023. Now, there are plenty of developments across the region, including vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, and on that, let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, what can you update us on with the latest?
So the most active front right now seems to be the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where the Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, announced that 40,000 residents of the Tulkarem area have been evicted for a while, and that he has directed the IDF to stay in specific communities for at least a year, so that the terrorists would not be able to resume their activities. The other fronts are simmering. They are not yet burning. They are perhaps preparing to restart the fire. But we see in the Syrian arena, across from the Israeli border and from on Mount Hermon, in Lebanon, where the IDF is gradually withdrawing, except from several, half a dozen points, and even in Gaza, where there was a failed attempt to launch a rocket into Israel, the IDF immediately struck back at the launching point. The rocket itself fell inside Gaza. But wherever there is even the slightest commotion, Israel does not wait for it to become a threat. The diplomatic front is now most active because the first phase of the hostage deal is almost over. There are four bodies of Israeli hostages still outstanding that Hamas must return to Israel, and Israel has delayed the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in protest for the way Hamas treated the earlier bodies. Also, the ministry...
Before you continue on that, we're talking about roughly 600 Palestinian terrorists set to be released, but nonetheless, there is much talk about extending the first phase. Can you clarify this matter for the sake of our viewers?
Yes, the first phase was supposed to take 42 days, 6 weeks, in which there will be an exchange of hostages for prisoners, and there will be a redeployment of IDF forces from the Philadelphia route. This is at the very end of this phase, and from other points within Gaza. During that phase, negotiations should have started and presumably consumed regarding what will happen in the second phase, which once again should take 42 days, and in which the rest of the hostages will be returned. Some 55, presumably 20 or so are still alive. The others are dead. The problem from the Israeli government's point of view is that Hamas, at least up to now, has insisted that even before phase 2 begins, Israel will announce that once it is over, the war will end. For the Netanyahu government, this is politically untenable. The coalition might fall apart. And therefore, the new idea, which Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff will explore from tomorrow and throughout the next several days, once he comes to Israel and to other points in the region, is to extend phase 1 in a similar fashion, another batch of hostages for another batch of prisoners. But up to now, Hamas has not agreed to that. let's see whether there is any pressure that can be put on Hamas. The other point I was going to mention was that the Ministry of Defense has now frozen almost $500 million that the Palestinian Authority is due, because these are taxes that under earlier agreements Israel collects from employers and other services and is supposed to hand over to the Palestinians. It's their money, but Israel is now withholding these receipts as punishment for the Palestinian Authority paying the prisoners, those still in jail and those released, including Israeli nationals who were charged and convicted for security offenses. And until the Palestinians change this habit, Israel intends to hold this money.
The so-called pay-for-slay conundrum. Of course, initially, last month, we heard Palestinian Authority come out and adopt a decree by the chairman of the PA, namely Mahmoud Abbas, who said that they would end this habit, of course, in an attempt to message the Trump administration to try and establish a certain overture. Nevertheless, just 2 days ago, we heard Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas come out and say, even to our last dime, we will continue to pay them.
In the United States, it's the Taylor Force Act.
Right.
In memory of an American reserve officer who was killed in Tel Aviv, murdered by a Palestinian.
Murdered by a Palestinian, merely less than 300 meters from where the wife and children of Joe Biden, when he was vice president, were eating at the time. A terrorist attack that was, of course, infuriating,
Right.
as all of them are. But nonetheless, this resonated in the American public, and as such, as a veteran of the armed forces of the United States, this was passed in Congress and done so deliberately. Now, let's turn to our distinguished panelists for today. Both the Israeli commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General Doron Gavish, Brigadier General in Reserve, and next to him, Brigadier General in Reserve Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the chief of the intelligence division at Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. And for today, I'd like to focus on all the various theaters, keep it short, to the point, and therefore we'll be able to touch on a whole variety of issues. General Gavish, I'd like to start with you, also due to the fact that the commander of Central Command, namely General Michael Kurilla, is currently in the country coordinating, holding situational assessments and other aspects with his counterparts here in Israel. And it's quite apparent that the Americans are preparing to deal with some of the threats emanating out of the Islamic Republic of Iran, namely initially the Houthis, where we hear the National Security Council in Washington instructing the UN envoy for Syria to hold off. And the question here is, of course, we're not expecting you to go into raw intelligence, but nonetheless, are we expected to see something big happening in Yemen in the near future following over 15 months in which this Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, dominated of course by the Houthi tribe, has not only frustrated freedom of navigation against the movement of ships in the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb, but also directly attacked Israel multiple times with both unmanned aerial vehicles and as well with ballistic missiles.
Well, Jonathan, first of all, allow me to say that in a personal note, I was not here for a week because I was visiting our friends in Sweden. And it was, I'm not sure that it is surprising, but it was very nice to meet a lot of our viewers. Every place that I've been to Malmo, I've been to Stockholm, and I met some of our viewers over there. They approached me, they say hello, and I promised them to say back hello now that we are in the show. So Hello to everyone in Sweden, and thank you for your support and being a part of our viewers. Going back to your question, allow me to follow up what was said by Amir, because I think that he really touched something which is very important. And this is at the end of the day, the change of strategy from the Israeli point of view. And we see it all along, and we see it across the different arenas that we are dealing with. We have to remember that we are still dealing with 7 different arenas, from Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Yemen to Iran to Gaza Strip, and of course the West Bank. And the changing of this strategy is that Israel is not going to be tolerant toward violations that would be occurred by our enemies or by those, I would say, countries around us that unfortunately are still trying to challenge Israel. This is what we've seen in Lebanon. This is what we are seeing also in some other places. The other thing, which is from the strategic point of view, it is also that probably one of the lesson learned that we have from the last war is that we are not looking only toward our enemies' intention and capabilities. We are mainly looking at their capabilities, and we are mainly looking at those capabilities that could arm Israel in a way that we should be prepared to it. So I think that this is what we are seeing in general on the behavior of the Israeli military. Of course, the IDF is continuously preparing himself as it did in the last few weeks, and is continuously doing it. From the one hand, we are making sure that all the agreements around us are holding, but then from the other end, of course, we are preparing for everything that could come from within the future, I would say. And this is something that it is expected from military as the IDF is. And of course, we have to remember that CENTCOM is still fully deployed here. There are close relations between Israel and the United States and the coalition that is led by the United States. The last thing that I would say when it comes to Yemen, we have to remember that this is not only an Israeli issue. This is really an international issue because what is being done by the Houthis in Yemen, this is something which is affecting everyone. It is affecting Europe, it is affecting others, and this is not only an Israeli issue. And if this is something that would be taken care of, it should be taken care of by a coalition.
It's a very strategic landmass, the location where it is. It's not a very rich country. It's actually one of the poorest in the world. But nonetheless, in recent weeks, we saw that the Houthis are encroaching on the Saudi-backed Yemenis in Yemen proper, and we're seeing them also increasing their rhetoric about if the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip collapses, there are going to be consequences where they decide to join once again in the fight. It seems like the Americans are more deliberate, as we heard both General Kurilla and his deputy, Admiral Bradford Cooper, who mentioned this also while he was the commander of the Fifth Fleet, or NAVCENT. It's all a matter of policy. They can deal with the situation kinetically, but they need a policy decision to give them the go-ahead. And who knows, maybe the leadership under President Donald Trump will provide such an order. We'll have to wait and see.
They are rich. They have the world's largest concentration of Yemenites.
Fair enough. Well, General Sofrin, I'd like to hear your take, if we may shift our attention to the head of the octopus before we touch on the other theaters. The Islamic Republic of Iran is voicing rhetoric against the United States, against Israel. All the while, they're also highlighting their displeasure with the American maximum pressure campaign and the fact that they're not willing to negotiate anything related to their nuclear program, irrespective of other facts that they are trying to pursue via their European counterparts. But nonetheless, intelligence reports on intelligence from the United States, both the Washington Post and other reputable papers, have alleged that Israel might be preparing for an attack in Iran during the course of 2025.
First of all, let's see that. Let us understand that Iran right now is weaker than it used to be before. First of all, the air defense systems are totally destroyed. They are very vulnerable, and of course they know it, and they know that Israel can take advantage of this situation and attack their nuclear facilities, at least part of them. But the situation is more complicated because due to the fact that President Donald Trump, doesn't want to go into a war with Iran. His aim is to apply maximum pressure on Iran and to bring it back to the negotiating table and to get a new agreement that will satisfy the Americans and will delay as much as possible the activities of Iran on the nuclear issue. I'm not sure that it can be demolished totally, but it will be postponed for many years ahead. Now, the fact that the Americans are going this way is, in a way, it's blocking Israel from, or denying Israel the ability to act by its own without coordination with the Americans. And as I understand that Mr. Trump doesn't want to go into a new wars. That's what he declared during the campaign, and he's going to declare it one more time and another. That means it's an ongoing declaration. He doesn't want to launch new wars. He wants to end the current wars, meaning Ukraine and the fighting in the Middle East, meaning all that goes around Israel. And he knows as well as we do that Iran is the head of the octopus, and Iran must be applied maximum pressure in order to bring it to the negotiating table, to get to some agreement that will delay as much as possible or stop the nuclear program of Iran, and therefore Israel cannot attack right now without coordination, and of course it cannot act against the will of the United States.
Indeed, we do need to take into account, of course, that the United States is at war with the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Iran has been at war with the United States, attacking it with impunity for quite some time. Of course, the United States responded every couple of dozen of attacks against its various targets, installations, and has established periods of deterrence, but this deterrence every time just was swept away, unfortunately, leaving America in a bad position alongside Israel. Thankfully, Iran has been brought to its knees by Israeli determination, but nonetheless, the United States could have done a lot more in this context. And with that, if we're looking now to another theater where the Iranians capitulated wholeheartedly or fully, Syria today marks the start of a national or conference on national dialogue, as we put it, by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the HTS-led interim government in Damascus, backed, of course, by both Qatar and the Turks. At the same time, we had yesterday the European Union come and lift a whole list of sanctions on this formerly designated, or still designated actually, terrorist organization. Make some sense to us on all of this?
So first of all, regarding General Kurila, this is his third meeting in less than 3 weeks with his counterpart, outgoing Israeli Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi. Kurila was here during the first week of this month. Then last week, he hosted General Halevi at the CENTCOM headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. And now he's back again to say farewell to Halevi.
Which is customary for a Chief of General Staff here in Israel to fly there, and then for the head of CENTCOM.
That's true. It doesn't mean that there are any operational plans right now. but it is nevertheless rare for a CENTCOM commander to be here so often. As for Syria and also Lebanon, where we had political leaders for the first time say that they are tired of Lebanon being a platform for other people's wars, namely the Iranians. Yes, there is a movement away from Tehran, and apparently the new regime in Syria will be judged by its actions and not by its record, which, as you say, was of a terrorist organization.
Indeed. Well, we'll have to wait and see, of course, to the American reaction to this, since the Americans were the ones who suffered in 9/11, the atrocities committed by Al Qaeda, and to see an Al Qaeda organization, basically, all the people who have assumed the senior positions in this new Syrian government and the Syrian military, the top generals and everybody around, are all Al Qaeda operatives who
Jonathan,
joined Al Qaeda immediately after 9/11.
This is ancient history.
No, it's not. Not for the people who sacrificed themselves for not only the terrorist attack, but that were sacrificed and murdered in the terrorists, but also in the subsequent wars, be it Afghanistan or Iraq. Thousands of American families are still feeling the brunt of that pain.
Yes, but they are not in decision-making circles. And you probably remember that President Trump, during his last year of the first term, reached an agreement at Doha with the Taliban regarding the American withdrawal. It was left for Biden to execute it, and perhaps not the way the military commanders on the ground wanted it. But nevertheless, even though Americans died in Afghanistan starting in October of 2001, less than 1 month after September 11, the Taliban were given back their rule over the country because of what you said regarding forever wars.
Indeed. Well, again, we're just reporting the news. We're not making the news in this case. But nonetheless, we don't have very much time left, and we still have 2 theaters that we have to touch. General Gavish, let's start with Lebanon. In 1.5 minutes, give us the headlines for it.
Well, in Lebanon, the situation is that Israel. There's an agreement between Israel and Lebanon, and we see it's something which is gradually happening. It is taking some time, but it is happening. We have to say, the Hezbollah is still trying here and there to get some positions, but what we are seeing is that Israel is not terrible at all toward the Hezbollah and it is behavior, and immediately if something like this is happening, the Hezbollah is being attacked. So it is going in general toward where it was planned for as an agreement. But once again, time will tell. We have to remember that the Israeli idea in Lebanon for the Hezbollah is that it would stay weak, is that it won't be able to rearm itself from any other options that he had in the past. Syria, of course, and what is happening in Syria could help us, but in general, they are still looking for ways to rearm, and Israel is eye on the ball, as we said, when it comes to this.
Absolutely. Dr. Sofrin, of course, the Mossad is not in charge of Judea and Samaria, but you also served as the acting general, the chief intelligence officer of the IDF Central Command, which is naturally Judea and Samaria. So in 2 minutes tops, what can you tell us about this theater? Despite Oren already, Mr. Oren, providing some insight, what should we focus on when we're talking about this very hectic situation right now?
I think that Judea and Samaria will be the next fighting arena regarding what Hamas and the Iranians want. They want to refuel the people in Judea and Samaria and to make them fight Israel and to make them cause damage to Israel as much as they can. And of course, now the IDF is reacting and acting in Jenin and in Tulkarem, trying to unroot all these people. But they will grow and grow in other places as well, and we have to go for either for an ongoing fighting in Judea and Samaria, fueled by the Iranians and weapon systems that are being smuggled from Jordan, from the Jordanian territory into Israel from many other places. And on the other hand, we have the other option that Israel will go into a huge operation, just like we had on 2002, the defensive shield operation, and try to get hold on all the areas of, or the A areas that were defined by the Oslo Accords, and to try to unroot all these people and to control the area, and to try to demolish all the infrastructures of Hamas and PA and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other organizations as well. And these are the two options. And of course, we are very close to the minute that we have to decide which way to go.
Indeed. In 30 seconds, Mr. Oren, there was an infiltration last night, very late last night, of a couple of individuals from Jordanian territory into Israel. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there was an alert, but it turned out that they are work migrants. These are people who came here to find some livelihood, but it does point to the fact that this particular sector is vulnerable, and therefore both the Shabak, the intelligence agency, the IDF, and the police must guard it more closely.
They must guard it very closely, and to put it also plainly, the Iranians are keen on seeing the Hashemite monarchy capitulate in Jordan. They see it as a stumbling block to its aspirations vis-a-vis Israel and other aspects of the region. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank both General Doron Gavish, General Dr. Amnon Sofrin, and Mr. Amir Oren, and I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.